Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. A few months back, as you all may remember, Florida got pretty beaten up by a couple of hurricanes. My folks lived down there, and while none of the damage that they sustained was life-alteringly horrible or home-destroying, homeowners insurance kicked in and they had some water damage through the roof. They also needed a new one because of all of the shingles that had come off and debris that had punctured it. My parents, Dan and Elaine, looked through roofing options and determined that a metal roof would be a great option to reduce damage and maintenance on their home. Plus, it would serve as a more energy-efficient option with passive solar collection and fewer thermal losses in the summer and winter. It's more expensive, but my dad was basically our personal finance incarnate while I was growing up. He's in his mid-60s and has finally concluded that he has duck you money so long as that community is concerned, so the roof was a good investment. "Look at these specs," Dad said one evening, spreading brochures across the kitchen table. "This metal roof will last 3 times longer than shingles and save us at least 20% on cooling costs." Mom nodded, examining the photos. "It looks so much nicer than those old tin roofs from decades ago. These modern ones actually look elegant." Then they reviewed the HOA guidelines and saw that as of 1992, metal roofs are prohibited in the neighborhood, subject to fines and mandatory removal. Reviewing the bylaw further showed that it was clearly referring to older, cheaper tin roofs, not a proper metal one like today's market provides, which looks great and has all of those other benefits. My folks wanted to play by the rules, though, and called up the HOA to explain the situation. Barbara, the HOA administrator, was friendly and said that they would be looking into that bylaw and that my folks weren't the only ones who requested that they be allowed to have a metal roof. "We've had several requests in the wake of these hurricanes," Barbara told my mom. "I'll bring it up at the next board meeting and get back to you. My parents couldn't get a roofing contractor in for a few months anyway. Too much demand since everyone else's roof got wrecked. So they waited a few weeks and got nothing new out of the HOA. Tried again a few weeks later. Nothing. After 2 months of this, they said forget it and started construction on the metal roof. Popular opinion in the neighborhood was on their side, and the roof was covered with a tarp that wouldn't last forever. The new roof got installed over the course of a few days, and then we found out the HOA's craftiness. The neighborhood has a nice brick sign out front that says, 'Welcome to Palm Harbor Estates.' It's very classy, very nice, and was very damaged in a hurricane. The HOA was strapped for money due to other repairs and dues, and some prick named Gerald had the bright idea to impose as many fines as they could on the neighborhood to pay for these repairs, starting with my folks. They served my folks with a letter claiming that they were in violation of the HOA and demanded a $25,000 fine and that they remove the roof, which is, of course, absurd. My poor mother is very much a play-by-the-rules sort, and she was worried sick. I called her one evening to find her voice shaking. "They want $25,000, Jamie," she said, "and they want us to tear off the brand new roof we just put on. What are we going to do?" Dad's ex-Navy and a contract negotiator. He essentially checked his 60-year-old knuckles and said, "Oh, you little craps want to play, do ya?" So they set about researching and making some calls. Poor Mom kept waking up at 1 a.m. unable to sleep, and I felt terrible for her as she went through this. But then they had a breakthrough. A few weeks after being served, I'm fuzzy on the timeline since I don't live in Florida, it may have been less. There was essentially a burn them at the stake meeting of the HOA where my parents could defend themselves for an absurdly short amount of time and the HOA could rip into them for daring to defy their wrath. So my mom, because she's more social and has a better temper than Dad, comes up to speak and lets the HOA know that they can't do this. Gerald smirked and adjusted his glasses. "We certainly can enforce this rule. It's been on the books since 1992. "You do have that rule," Mom said, pulling out a folder. "But I have state law on my side which supersedes your statute. Turns out there's a law in Florida stating that an HOA, or really any regulation, cannot be used to prevent an eco-friendly improvement from taking place on anyone's private property. And wouldn't you know it, the passive solar of the metal roof counts as an eco-friendly improvement. As you can see," Mom continued, holding up official-looking documents, "Florida Statute 163.04 specifically protects our right to make this improvement. Turns out, the roofing contractors have dealt with similar stuff before. When Dad mentioned what was going on to them, the contracting officer, Mike, pulled out a few letters of accreditation and a few past cases where the court had determined that their product was eco-friendly and forced the HOA to pay all legal fees. This comes up all the time," Mike had told my dad. "These old HOA rules never got updated when the technology improved. We've got your back." My mom produced all of this for the crappy HOA, who had to admit that this was in fact ironclad. Strapped for money as they were, they couldn't afford to pay a lawyer. Gerald, red-faced, growled, "Is that all?" Mom turned up the sweetness to 11. "No. I see in the bylaws that we can vote to impeach board members at any HOA meeting and elect their replacements. I move to impeach all of you. I nominate my husband and—" She rattled off a list of names. The HOA board members sat there stunned. "You can't just—" sputtered Tina, the treasurer. "Actually, she can," said our neighbor Jeff, standing up from the audience. "And I second the motion." While Dad looked into the legal aspects, Mom looked into the new neighborhood dynamics. Popular opinion was on their side, and the hearing was public for the neighborhood. Mom convinced a majority of the homeowners to attend and remove the board for their crappy policy. "The current board has demonstrated they're more interested in punitive fees than serving this community," she told the gathering. "We need people who will protect our homes, not exploit us after natural disasters." With that, my parents are now on the all-new board, and Dad is putting his contract negotiation skills and craftsmanship to work repairing the front entrance, and metal roofs are now allowed by the all-new HOA. "First order of business," Dad announced at their inaugural meeting, "is to update these bylaws to reflect modern building practices and energy-efficient options. The 1990s called, they want their outdated restrictions back. The next one is an entitled people story. Hash the day I became the world's worst employee." So this happened a few months back at one of those massive home improvement warehouse stores. You know the type, the ones where you need a map and a compass just to find the bathroom, and the aisles are so long you could train for a marathon jogging between the lumber section and the paint department. I was there on my day off, wearing a red polo shirt and khaki pants because apparently I hate myself and wanted to look exactly like every retail employee in the continental United States. In my defense, I had just come from helping my buddy move some furniture and hadn't bothered changing. Big mistake. I was in the plumbing section trying to find some specific pipe fittings for a bathroom renovation project at my house. My toilet had decided to start making sounds like a dying whale every time someone flushed it, and I was determined to fix it myself rather than pay a plumber $300 to tighten a valve. I was crouched down, examining different sizes of washers and completely minding my own business when I heard the sound. You know that particular tone of voice? The one that screams entitlement from 3 aisles away? That shrill, commanding bark that makes every retail worker within earshot instinctively check if their 2 weeks' notice is still valid? Someone barked out something about needing help immediately, and I figured some poor employee was about to have a bad day. I kept looking at my washers. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Then I felt a sharp tap on my shoulder. Actually, tap is too gentle a word. It was more like someone was trying to get my attention by practicing their woodpecker impression on my shoulder blade. I stood up and turned around to find this woman glaring at me with the kind of expression usually reserved for people who just discovered their car got towed. She was probably in her 50s, had that specific haircut that should come with a warning label, and was clutching her purse like it contained the nuclear launch codes. She immediately started going off about how lazy employees were these days, standing around doing nothing while customers needed help. I opened my mouth to explain that I definitely did not work there, but she cut me off before I could get a word out. She needed someone to help her load 50 bags of concrete mix into her cart, and she needed it done right now because she had been waiting for 10 whole minutes and this was completely unacceptable. I tried again to tell her I wasn't an employee. She wasn't having it. She told me to stop making excuses and do my job, or she would speak to my manager. The condescending tone she used made it clear she thought I was some kind of idiot trying to shirk my responsibilities. Now, I'm generally a patient person. I've worked retail before, back in my college days, so I know what it's like to deal with difficult customers. I have sympathy for people in the service industry, but something about her attitude just rubbed me the wrong way. The way she kept interrupting me, the way she looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe, the way she acted like I owed her something just because she decided I worked there. And that's when I had a thought. A beautiful, terrible thought. She wanted an employee? She wanted someone to help her? Fine, I would help her. I told her I would be happy to assist her with the concrete mix. Her whole demeanor changed immediately. She got this smug, satisfied look on her face like she had just won some kind of victory. She turned on her heel and started marching toward the outdoor building materials section, clearly expecting me to follow like a loyal puppy. I grabbed an empty flatbed cart on the way and followed her outside to where they kept the pallets of concrete mix. She pointed at the bags, all 50 pounds each, and told me she needed 50 of them. Not 49, not 51. Exactly 50. Here's the thing about concrete mix. It's heavy, it's messy, and if you're buying 50 bags of it, you probably should have arranged for delivery or at least brought some help. But she was insistent that she needed them right now, and that loading them was part of my job. I started loading the bags onto the flatbed cart. Each one weighed 50 pounds, so we're talking about 2,500 pounds of concrete total. The flatbed cart was rated for 2,000 pounds max, according to the little label on the side. But she said 50 bags, and I was going to maliciously comply with exactly what she demanded. As I loaded bag after bag, the cart started to sag noticeably in the middle. The wheels were straining, but I kept going. She stood there watching me with her arms crossed, occasionally making comments about how I should move faster or be more careful not to tear the bags. After I got about 30 bags loaded, an actual employee walked by and stopped dead in his tracks. He asked what I was doing, and before I could answer, the woman jumped in and told him she had instructed me to load 50 bags for her. The employee, bless his heart, looked at the overloaded cart and then at me, and I could see the confusion on his face because he definitely did not recognize me as a coworker. He started to say something about weight limits, but the woman cut him off too. She launched into this whole speech about customer service and how she had already waited long enough, and if there was a problem with the cart, then we should get a stronger cart, but she was not leaving without her concrete today. The employee looked at me, I looked at him, and I gave him the tiniest shrug. He seemed to realize something weird was going on, but decided this was way above his pay grade. He walked away, shaking his head. I continued loading. 40 bags. 45 bags. The cart was groaning under the weight. The wheels looked like they were about to explode, but I kept going until all 50 bags were precariously stacked on this poor, abused flatbed cart. The woman inspected my work, sniffed dismissively, and told me to bring it to the front for checkout. Then she started walking toward the registers. I began pushing the cart, or trying to push it. The thing barely moved. When it did move, it made sounds that machinery should never make. Metal grinding on metal, wheels squeaking in protest, the whole structure shaking like it was having an existential crisis. We made it maybe 20 feet before the inevitable happened. The flatbed cart, which had endured more abuse than any cart should have to suffer, finally gave up on life. The front wheel, the one that had been looking suspicious for the past 10 minutes, simply snapped off. The front of the cart dropped to the ground with a spectacular crash, and all 50 bags of concrete came sliding forward in a cascade of gray paper sacks. Several bags split open on impact. Concrete dust exploded into the air like a small volcanic eruption. The woman who had been walking several feet ahead got caught in the dust cloud. She started coughing and sputtering, waving her arms around like she was being attacked by invisible bees. The noise brought employees running from every direction. A manager arrived on the scene, taking in the destroyed cart, the pile of concrete bags, the dust cloud that was slowly settling over everything, and the woman who was now covered in a fine layer of gray powder. The woman immediately started yelling about the incompetent employee who had broken the cart and ruined her concrete. She pointed at me and demanded I be fired immediately. The manager looked at me, looked at my red polo shirt, and asked for my employee ID. I smiled and told him I didn't have one because I didn't work there. Never had. I was just a customer trying to buy some pipe fittings. The woman's face went through an impressive range of colors. Red, purple, an interesting shade that I can only describe as confused eggplant. She started stammering something about how I was wearing the uniform and I had helped her load the concrete and I never told her I didn't work there. I calmly explained that I had tried to tell her multiple times that I wasn't an employee, but she kept interrupting me and insisting I help her. I was just trying to be nice and assist a customer since she seemed so desperate for help. The manager's expression shifted as he realized what had happened. He looked at the destroyed cart, the cleanup that would be needed, the 50 bags of concrete that would all have to be checked for damage, and the woman who was still coughing up concrete dust. He told the woman that since I wasn't an employee and she had essentially commandeered a random customer to do heavy labor for her, the store wasn't liable for any of this. She would need to pay for any damaged merchandise, including the cart. She tried to argue, but the manager wasn't having it. Security footage would show everything, he said. She had forced a customer to do something dangerous, the cart was overloaded beyond its limits, and this whole situation was on her. The woman left without her concrete, still sputtering threats about lawsuits and corporate complaints. I have no idea if anything came of it, but I doubt it. The manager turned to me and apologized for the situation. I told him it wasn't his fault and headed back to the plumbing aisle to finally get those washers I needed. On my way out, I passed the concrete section again. There was a small crew cleaning up the mess, and the remains of the flatbed cart had been pushed to the side like a monument to malicious compliance. I fixed my toilet that weekend. Every time I flush it now and hear the normal, non-whale-like sound of water flowing smoothly through properly fitted pipes, I think about that woman and smile. The moral of the story? If someone tells you they don't work somewhere, maybe believe them. And definitely don't treat random strangers like your personal servants, because sometimes people will give you exactly what you ask for, and you might not like the results. The next one is a petty revenge story. Years ago, I was at my girlfriend's house from about 2 a.m. playing board games. In San Francisco, it's tough to find parking, so I rode my scooter to her place and parked between two driveway cutouts on a curb that was approximately 3 wide. This is quite common, perfectly legal, and normally not a big deal. To be clear, I was not blocking their garage, but I did park between 2 cars parked in front of their garage. I have been to her 6-unit apartment building dozens of times and have seen their no parking signs on the building between the 3 garage doors in front of the curb area I parked at. I came out to my scooter with both vehicles still parked in the same position they were in when I arrived to find a note on my seat. I loved the anger, sarcasm, rage, and entitlement, so of course I kept it, and it is now placed prominently on my refrigerator for all to read. I appreciate this guy's effort and outrage despite being a petty note to leave. It kinda reminds me of something I might do, making sure I was in compliance with the law, however. The note, sadly I can't share a picture of it. I am wondering if you are illiterate, have a poor sense of spatial recognition, don't care if your bike is damaged when I have to pull out of the space since you have not left me enough room to do so safely, or you don't care if you are cited or towed. Move your bike before you are sorry you ignored the no parking sign and don't park here again. There are many other available spaces for you to park. Next day at work, I looked up parking codes in San Francisco, and turns out you cannot park in front of your garage if you live in a building with more than 2 units, and you can only install no parking signs on a garage door. I called SF 311 and reported the situation, and the next time I went to visit her, the no parking signs between the garages were removed, and I never saw a car parked in front of the garage doors again. I only felt bad for the other 2 people who can no longer park in front of their garages because of this Karen/Kevin. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I, now 53M, then around 20M, used to work for a now-defunct electronics retailer called Circuit City in Southern California. The staff was paid on a commission basis and were pressed daily to sell our extended warranty packages as a way to increase revenue. To explain how the extended warranties work is to explain how the company made most of its income by scamming not only the customers, but also its suppliers. How it worked is thus. When a customer comes in and wishes to purchase a product, they are offered an extended warranty. So if anything happens to the product, they simply bring it back and it would get repaired by an on-site department. If it could not be repaired, it would be replaced. The room for the repair department was a 5x5-foot closet with a shelf, and customer service was instructed to carry the product into that room, put it on the shelf, and return 15 minutes later to pick it up, bringing it back to the customer with the unfortunate information that it could not be repaired but would have to be replaced. The customer would then leave the store with a new product, and the store would send the product back to the manufacturer as defective, never having inspected it in the first place, while at the same time taking a full credit on the product and receiving full credit for it. So the company was able to minimize the cost of labor, while simultaneously receiving income from both sides, the supplier and the manufacturer. Now here's where the story begins. I worked as a salesman on the floor in the department that sold the items that could not be clumped together neatly, such as sections for televisions, stereo equipment, kitchen appliances, laundry machines, refrigerators, etc. At the time, this included Walkman, the precursor to the iPod, which utilized cassette tapes, mini disc players, CD Walkman, and desktop computers and accessories such as monitors, printers, and various other items that attach to computers. This was prior to laptops being ubiquitous, so all these items were bulky and heavy. One day, a guy came in ratty clothing, sweating from head to toe and stinking like he hadn't showered in a week. The other salesmen and women decided he was not worth their time, and I got instructed to help him while security was called to escort him off the premise. I found out he was in the shop to get a replacement Walkman, as while out for a run, the one he had failed. I walked him over to the shelf that had all the portable music devices and, after listening to what he was looking for, did not direct him to the most expensive product we sold, attempting to upsell him, but providing him with the most affordable option for what he was looking to purchase. He even asked about the extended warranty, and I told him to not bother with it. He paid for the Walkman and left before security could arrive, and I made maybe $2 on the sale. For the next 2 weeks, I got hounded by the other salespeople and managers that I was not pushing the warranties enough, depriving myself of the sales income that comes with it, thus losing money in the process. About 2 weeks later, when I arrived at work, I was told there was a customer who had come in, asked about me, and left, telling them he'd return when I did. After a few minutes of being on the floor, a man, the same one that had been sweaty, arrived in a full suit, expensive at that, flanked by two others in business suits, asking for me. Turns out he runs multiple private schools and was looking to purchase a few computers for them, without all the extended frills that were unnecessary. Now, the computer sales, at the time, were the crown jewels on the sales floor. And if a salesman sold one, they were king of the hill of the sales force that week. This guy wanted 10 of them for his students to use, and I was personally requested by him to be the one to make those sales. I walked him through what we had, and the final bill was over $15K, blowing away the next biggest sale that year by $10K. When it came time to pay me and hand me the biggest check that store had written that year, the staff decided to hold a ceremony in my honor and asked me to speak to encourage others that there was money to be made. I said only 4 words. Thank you. I quit and walked out of the ceremony, got into my car, and drove home, never to go back to that store again. The next one is an entitled people story. I used to be a property shepherd during the foreclosure years. While borrowers, bankers, occupants, and lawyers fought things out, I kept an eye on the houses themselves and made sure that people who needed to know things knew things, and that things that needed to get done, got done. A house in an older suburb went vacant, so I started my checklist of preservation and inspection things that needed to get done to allow the house to be sold. One task I did on all properties was check the parcel maps. In most cases, I was just making sure the house was on the right lot, that there weren't adjacent or non-adjacent lots included in the foreclosure, nothing that couldn't be eyeballed most of the time. If a lender needed a more detailed survey later on, I could arrange that, but it didn't come up too often. Parcel maps generally come in 2 forms, a platted map or meets and bounds. Platted maps are usually a bunch of rectangles stacked next to each other. Lot 1 is 40x80, Lot 2 is 40x80, and so on. They can have different shapes, but are pretty straightforward and easy to tell if something is amiss. Mates and bounds read like an old logo program. Start at point XY. Go north 50 feet, do an arc to the NW with radius this for so many feet, then go in the new direction so many feet, and eventually back to the starting point. You can eyeball the general idea and have a paper diagram to aid you, but again, if something wasn't seriously amiss, I'd leave it for the lender to care about, if they did. But at this house, something didn't look right. There was a chunk of fence extending at a weird angle, worth a closer look. So I stood at the appropriate corner, faced the appropriate direction, and started pacing off the distance. I was in marching band years earlier, but my formal gait is still accurate to an inch or 2. 8 steps equals sign, 10 yards, ball of your foot on the chalk line every time. Always start with your left foot, get it right, or run into somebody. Anyhow, long before the measured length of that line, there was the fence. No weathering. Couldn't have been there more than a couple of months at most. A 7 or 8 privacy fence, so I had nothing idea what was on the other side. It carved maybe a 20-foot length onto the yard I cared about, then angled back to their yard, carving a big wedge out of the lot I was shepherding. I knew just what to do. Send the meets and bounds description to 2 surveyors, specify the magic words stake survey and boundary dispute, send the bids to my client saying I think the neighbor is encroaching, may I commission the survey? Within an hour, I am told to pick the lower bid and I let him know. About a week later on, get an email with a copy of his survey map, building locations noted relative to the property lines and told the certified copy is in the mail. All routine. He had noted the encroachment of the neighbor's fence as expected. I plan to go out the next day to check things out. I drive up. Wooden stakes, tops painted day-glow orange, vinyl ribbons stapled to the top. A bit of paint on the lawn at the base of each one. Orange marks where the property line intersected the fence. But there were a couple of stakes haphazardly pushed into the dirt on the outside of the fence that weren't marked on the map. I found a vantage point where I could peek into the yard and saw a couple of points on the lawn that were painted orange, but no stakes. And the mystery stakes didn't have the ground paint. The neighbors had pulled up the stakes inside the fence and tried to redefine the lot lines around it. Yeah, no, I told the surveyor. Now, tampering with boundary markers is an actual crime. Big fines, jewelry, jail, and since it happened within a short period of time, the surveyor had to come back and fix it for no extra charge, and this made him irritable. It seems that every surveyor is on good terms with the sheriff's department and can get a deputy out whenever they need. You see, surveyors are honey badger and they don't care. If they are following a lot line fences and gates mean nothing, and if they run into an uncooperative neighbor they need backup on short notice. This is how the stakes got inside the fence in the first place. Neighbors probably weren't home. He went in, staked, marked the fence on the inside and left. Now, because of the good relationship they have, anybody who works with them also gets fairly prompt attention. So I called UO, the sheriff's dispatch number, told them who I was, who the surveyor was, and that the neighbor was moving boundary stakes around. I waited an hour or so, and the deputy pulls up. I identify myself, let him know this is a vacant home, freshly surveyed, and pointed out the moved stakes, the paint on the fence, showed him how to see the stakeless paint inside the yard, and my copy of the survey map, all while the neighbors peeked through the windows. "Wait here," he told me as he strode up to the door and knocked with authority. "County deputy, open up," he barked. When somebody answered, he asked him to step outside. After a minute of quiet talking, he gestured me closer. He said that it was apparent that some survey stakes had been moved and it was very much illegal to do so. The man gestured weakly and said something about how the property was always liked that, but didn't really look at either of us. The deputy said the surveyor would be back out to reset the stakes and asked the man if there would be any more problems, because if he had to come out again, somebody was going to jail. The man said there wouldn't be any more problems. Deputy asked if I was satisfied, and of course I was. He gave me his card and said if there were any more issues, call back and ask for him directly. The survey was disclosed to any potential buyers. They either had part of a wooden fence they could tear down and burn, or keep it as was, or move it to the lot line, or sell the land to the neighbor for all anybody cared. The conflict was over. Anyway, thank you for watching.